This book is The Westing Game by Ellen Raskin. This one was actually one of my favorite books for being actually one of the weirdest books I've ever read. It is very interesting. It is basically about an older man who gets murdered, and his nieces and nephews try to figure out who did it, and it was apparently one of them according to his will. So, basically, yeah, they're trying to figure it out. I cannot think of too many things that a younger child wouldn't want to read, but it is kind of freakish, so I would actually limit to 12 to adult. Yes, adult, I would give this to an adult because it is actually interesting and it is not kiddie at all. So, yeah, and it's also mystery, which I know some of you are thinking nobody likes. Some people really hate mystery, but it is not a cheesy mystery like Nancy Drew Hardy Boys or Boxcar Children. It's actually very interesting, and it had me guessing up until the end. There were a few parts, hold on, let me think. There was the part where two kids were running out of his house, screaming. One of them died, the other had blood on his hands. So as I said, you wouldn't want to give this to a too young child. And then the other parts where they got bombed, but there wasn't really anything too bad. I mean, depending, if you want to give it to your child, you can, but it's a little creepy for a child. But it isn't overly creepy like a horror story, so I would recommend it. I would give it a 6 out of 7 other than those facts. And yeah, it is also a John Newbery Medal award-winning book. Really like that fact. I usually get books with award-winning medals, either that or New York Times bestselling author. But either or, most of the time the Newbery Honor Award-winning medals are pretty good, but sometimes the New York Times bestselling authors are not, so I don't know. Depends. And as I said before, this is all my opinion, so if you want your child reading this, or if you absolutely do not want to read this at all yourself, then go right ahead and think what you want, but this is very good book, and I loved it, and I would read it again and again, which is fortunate because I also bought the book. This is The Prince and the Pauper, retold from the Mark Twain original. I found this one very interesting and also kind of funny. It is where two boys look almost exactly alike, and they trade places, and they try to get back to each other to get their places back. This one should be known among most of you, but if it is not, this is what this video is for. I found it pretty good. I would rate it a 6 out of 7. I would give it to a pretty young child. Maybe 10 and up. I would not give it the high of 11 and 12, but 10 would be pretty good. Or maybe even 9. But I mean, there was just one teeny little violence part, but other than that, it was pretty good. I don't think this should induce any bad habits, and I would rate it a 6 out of 7. Yeah. This one is Knights of the Round Table, adapted by Gwen Gross. I don't know if that's Gwen Gross or Gwen Gross, but you can check for yourself. You can choose for yourself. I don't really care which. This is Stepping Stones edition. It is not a full edition, but I don't think I'd ever get a full edition. for me. It's depending if you like all the knights and the kings and the princesses and all this stuff like that. Dragons and everything and giants. Most of you should know this book. It is like the most classic book that everybody should know, the story of King Arthur. The story was okay. Personally, I do actually like knights and kings, but, this one was kind of a little too dark for me. I did not enjoy it. It had black magic, violence, a whole bunch of stuff, so I would not give this to a younger child. I would say 11 to teens, whatever age teen you like. But depending if you don't mind your child reading this, that's fine. This is just my opinion. I would rate it a 4 out of 7 because I didn't really enjoy it at all. So, yeah, it's not really recommended, and this one I have right here is kind of skinny. You can get the full version and see how good it is, but especially a full version, I would not give it to a younger child. This one might be okay if you want to, Stepping Stones, because it's easy to read. The print is like big, and the pictures are okay. But other than that, iffy book. Not that great. This is King of the Wind by Margaret Henry. The story of the Godolphin Arabian. I believe that is a type of horse, but don't judge me if I'm wrong. It is a pretty good book. Found it interesting. Ending was not predictable. It was about a horse who has a strange neck, as you probably will be able to see in the picture. And his owner tries to keep him from being taken away or being beaten up or anything. It is a pretty good book. I would actually give it to a younger child. I would rate it a 5 out of 7 because it didn't actually hold my interest. I kind of got bored after like the first 10 minutes. Usually, books that skinny, I can be done within like half an hour. But this one, I was so uninterested, it took me like forever. Felt like maybe 1.5, 2 hours. I'm not sure. I didn't really check the clock or set a timer. This one is also a John Newbery Medal Award-winning book. I really like books like that, as I may have mentioned before. I believe most of Margaret Henry's books have award winnings. So yeah, I'd recommend this book and the author as well. This book is called Throwback by Peter Larangis, a New York Times best-selling author. This one is a pretty interesting book. I've never really read a book like this. It did kind of start out a little weird, and I would kind of put an age limit because I believe there might have been a curse word too in here. But other than that, I think it was pretty good. I believe it's also newer. But I had perfectly good interest in this. So other than the curse word and maybe a few violence parts in here, it is pretty good. So I would not give it to a younger child, but maybe 11, 12 or higher. I would give it to a teenager though, not an adult, but a teenager. It was written in 2019, so it's pretty new, which explains a few things in here. There is, I believe, 2 murder scenes. That is what I meant by violent scenes in the middle. 2 murder and some very violent fights. So that is why I wouldn't give it to a younger child. But I think 11, 12 and up should be good. But depending if you want your child reading that or not, or you yourself. This one I got from my library. Also, one thing I would like to mention is that it's hard to tell which one of these is book 1 and which one is book 2. I stood there for about 5 minutes trying to figure it out, because this one, okay, so this one's the first book. It says book 1, and then the next book, it just has blank. It doesn't say, like, book 2 or anything. It doesn't say anything at all. It just says throwback, and that's it. The only difference is that one had more of a title. It was called The Chaos Loop. This one is just throwback, so that might help, but if you want to know which one to get for the first one, it would be the one that says book 1. And also, I read the book 2, and apparently there's a book 3, but I did not see it at the library, so I'll have to look into that. But I would rate this a 5 out of 7. I would give it a 6 out of 7, but the curse words and the violent scenes were kind of for me. So, yeah. Other than that, I think it was a pretty interesting book, and as I said, the author has a interesting way of putting his books. I haven't read any books like his. So if you want a weird book, and if we want a newer book, this one would be the way to go. Also, I think there's... so basically this one is about a kid who can focus on a piece of metal and go to the time that the metal was either made or dated. I can't remember which. Or just the time that it was taken. I don't exactly understand that part, but it is basically where the guy can go throughout time. He cannot go forward because there's no pieces of metal from the future, unless he goes back in time and takes stuff from the present with him, then he can go forward in time. But other than that, I don't think he can go in the future. So yeah, that's just about it. 5 out of 7. 12 and up.